Tapestry weaves together the threads of our struggles and doubts, curiosities, our faith, our joys and hopes to create meaningful conversations that matter. You know those late night conversations that go unexpectedly deep? That's what we want to capture with the Tapestry Podcast. And we want everyone to jump in the conversation. Because when we are heard and valued, we can begin to believe we are loved. Welcome to the Tapestry Podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Tapestry Podcast. I am here with my friends Mike.
Hey, everybody.
And Reb.
Hi there.
And we are here to talk about anxiety and our personal experiences with anxiety.
Yeah, last one we kind of talked a little bit more general idea of what anxiety is. Here, we're going to get into a little bit more of how we've experienced anxiety personally, and also kind of the impacts that anxiety can have on our relationships, socially, also on our work, and kind of all those little impacts that maybe people diminish or like minimize. They're like, oh, you're just feeling kind of nervous about that. But like, they can have real world, long lasting impacts. So let's talk about that. Does anybody want to start with their own experience of anxiety?
I can, because my best experience with anxiety is just how I live with it. I was diagnosed in my adulthood. I started going to therapy, I think, at about 19 or 20 years old. I had been going for about 2 years, but it was due to some experiences that I had had with loss. I had struggled with a lot of traumatic loss, and I had ended up losing my ability to experience like regular emotions and like cry normally at like normal things. Because for everybody who does not know me, I am the biggest baby. I cry at everything. I'm talking ASPCA commercials, all of it. Anyway, I lost the ability to do all of that. And so the only way I could really express that was in the form of severe panic attacks. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see anything. I felt like I was dying. I felt like my world was exploding, and that there was somebody taking me from the very top of my head like this and just pulling me apart into two different people. Because that's how it felt for me in that moment. And so when that happened to me, one of the times I was on the interstate, sorry, Mom, if you hear this is long gone in the past now. But I had one on the interstate where I almost passed out while I was driving. And that was enough for me to start getting help, seeking help, finding answers for what was going on to me. And that's when I ended up with my anxiety diagnosis.
Thanks for sharing, Mikayla.
Wow.
Sorry. Were you going to say more, Mike?
No, that was important sharing. Thank you.
Yeah. Very brave too. Mine kind of not the same, Mikayla, but I would say I've had anxiety my whole life. I didn't know that, obviously, when I was a kid and that kind of thing. And I mentioned on the last episode that I had some like GI and some like sickness issues, physical sickness issues that doctors couldn't find a reason for. And so in the end, and especially as I look back on it, I'm like, oh, that was absolutely anxiety and stress that I was like internalizing and my body didn't know what to do with. And so my stomach was in knots and having all kinds of trouble. And then I'd say like relatively low level anxiety, but pretty consistent my entire life. And I would say that showed up as a student a lot in terms of, just so much stress, anxiety, nervousness around performance in school and making good grades and people pleasing. And then I think I started to get a little bit better of a handle on it. I definitely intentionally, when I got to college, started doing less. Like in high school, I was involved in everything. I was straight A student and student council and dance team and everything that you could be in, I was in. And so that was much. And in college, I learned like, okay, don't do as much. And that definitely helped things that I wasn't as involved in as many things. And I wasn't as worried about making perfect grades and that kind of thing. And then I think into adulthood, it just kind of ebbed and flowed. Interestingly, I have 2 young children now, and that my anxiety, I think, I'm at a new dimension of anxiety being a mother, especially a mother of small children. And I think, so I'm learning all kinds of new things now, even after a lifetime of experiencing anxiety, about how to manage my new anxiety with these little tiny humans that I'm responsible for, and keeping them alive, and all that comes with that, with the hormones. And it's been a kind of a wild ride, and I'm still learning a lot about my anxiety in this phase of being a mother.
Oh man, that is such a good way to talk about it too. Like, we change over time, right? Like our life circumstances change, our very bodies change. And so the way we experience things like anxiety will naturally change. I've been very fortunate in my life that I have experienced anxiety really mostly situationally, and for kind of brief times, usually having to do with some circumstance going on in my life. So whether that's like an especially hard time in school or at work, or family stuff or health things. Definitely one of the most anxious times in my life was, longtime listeners know that my amazing wife and I have been married for several years now, but before that, both of us were previously married. So I was previously married to someone else, and kind of as that was falling apart, I think is a pretty good word for it, or dying might be another good word. As that relationship was ending, oh man, like I was full of anxiety for all sorts of reasons. And part of that was feelings of inadequacy and, of course, loss, and feeling like I'd failed at something really important. And then when that phase kind of started to go away, when, like life continued on, I wasn't anxious so much anymore. So I'm really, really thankful that I haven't had the same experience as many of my friends, including my friends here on the podcast, of kind of like a near constant state of some level of anxiety that needs to be managed in a way that more than just like, go to sleep and wake up and eat some good food and maybe do some exercise, because those things can certainly help. And I think we'll probably talk about some of that at some point here. But I'm super lucky. So I've been around friends and family members who have dealt with it in different ways, or had to deal with it in different ways, and it has impact. So I guess it might be a good time to talk about some of those impacts, like how, maybe talk about yourselves if you'd like, but also, especially Reb, I'd love to hear from you about the experience of maybe some of your clients, of like, what does this impact? Like what's the scope of what anxiety can do in somebody's life?
Yeah, I think, it's, it can be as minimal as no one really knowing it that much besides the person experiencing it. Or it can be as dramatic as, not being able to maintain someone who really suffers from chronic, like, panic attacks, which I would say is kind of the far end of the spectrum of anxiety. That can be so debilitating, as Mikayla, you had tested, that can cause someone to lose their job, relationships. I think also relationships can really suffer, due to anxiety, because, a lot of us end up partnered with people not like us, right? And so one partner in a relationship might be suffering from anxiety and the other partner not. And that can be really tough on a relationship, because someone who doesn't have a lived experience of anxiety, it can be really hard to understand, what that person is going through. And I think its impact can hit a lot of parts of life.
For sure. And especially with panic attacks, because I know during that like month-long period where I was just suffering. Anytime I had a panic attack, the next 2 days, I could barely text anybody. I could barely call anybody. It took all of my energy to go to work, come home, and get ready for the next day. It was incredibly hard for me to deal with it. And even on a good day, sometimes I could have something stressful coming up and I won't be able to do anything for my whole day before that because I'm so freaked out that I can't think about anything else but that. And then I end up exhausting myself by just anxiously sitting there waiting for this thing, wondering what's going to happen at this thing or what I'm going to do or how it's going to go. It ends up just exhausting me over time. Yeah. And that's what I think most of my like low level anxiety sits at. It just takes a little bit of my energy per day. Like if I woke up at 100% battery, it eats that first 10%. Just always. That is a constant 10% gone because of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And that's how that really, I think, sits and affects me a lot of the time.
That's really good. Like what a great, it eats that first 10% of the battery. I mean, I think in my experience of anxiety, which listener, if you maybe have a similar experience to me, I didn't mean to belittle that experience. It's, even if it's not chronic, that doesn't mean that it's not really impactful. Yeah. So I know for me, like, yeah, it was just draining. Like I'd be just exhausted at the end of the day in a way that, and then like not be able to sleep maybe all through the night and then wake up feeling tired and all of that. Like it's just debilitating, right? It can drag everything down. And whether that's, relationships and like, I think for me, maybe not wanting to burden somebody else with my, like what's going on inside, which means that like, I just kind of hold it all in and don't share it when I really did have people around me who could like actually help me carry that burden, carry that load while I need it to be. And maybe that's also like a word of encouragement or hope for anybody who, has experienced anxiety in the way that I have. And that is to say that like it might only be for a season. It might only be for this time in your life and things really will get better. And even if it is something that's more chronic, there are ways that it can get better and that you can become healthier and it can dominate your life less. And Reb, I saw you kind of nodding along to that. Why were you nodding?
Oh, just that there's, several things. I think anxiety is a really difficult experience, no matter whether it is something you experience every day or not. So yeah, I think I nodded to that because I'm like, yes, anxiety is challenging, whether it's just anxiety over taking a test or anxiety for a season. Anxiety is I think it's almost like an underrepresented like difficulty, because so many people do struggle with it. So that's part of why I was nodding, and also just nodding with like the hope of there is a lot of hope for anyone experiencing anxiety, no matter whether it's situational or chronic or panic attacks, that there is so much hope.
Yeah, that's good.
And something that like really helps add to that hope is seeking help. Yeah. Going to therapy, asking for coping strategy, even medication. A lot of people do not like the idea of medication, but if it helps you, who cares? Yeah. It's there to be there as a benefit. And speaking from personal experience, my life has gotten very stressful and very anxiety inducing within the last 2 weeks. So I've been debating getting some anti-anxiety medication or something to help me deal with that, because I don't want my life to be affected by the amount of just general anxiety that I sit with now on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the ironies actually in some people I know who have wanted to be like, oh, I don't want to go on that medication. Maybe it feels like a crutch or an admission of weakness or something. But they'll end up self-medicating in some way, right? Whether that's alcohol or some other drugs or whatever it is. And it's like, you're like, you don't know what you're doing. Obviously they don't think of it that way, right? But that's another thing. We end up. And so this isn't I'm not trying to cast judgment. We all tend to end up finding what seems to work for us in the moment. And sometimes that thing works in the moment and actually has a negative impact in the long run. And so finding someone who can talk to you about what's going on and maybe find the appropriate kind of medication rather than a medication that's actually just going to cause more problems down the line, or even just any coping mechanism that can end up being problematic later on. Yeah, if you can build the good skills and avoid the coping mechanisms that can cause actually more harm than good later on, that's a really good thing.
Agreed.
Reb, I bet you've seen some of those coping mechanisms that cause harm. Are there any that you can think of? I mean, I think it's fine if we name them out loud.
Yeah, I mean, are there any I can think of? All of them. I can think of all of them.
Yeah.
But these are bad, everybody. These are bad. Don't do them, please.
Even like a spectrum. Like I can think of coping mechanisms that are not terrible. And I can think of some that are, obviously you've got drugs and alcohol and sex and gambling and these kind of addictive behaviors that are often, not always, but often connected to covering something or trying to mend something that's troubling you. And then all the way to like, then you can see people over exercising or scrolling for hours and hours, like avoiding
like doom scroll.
Yeah. Or just like tapping out of life, I see a lot of that now, but yeah, I think all of it. I feel like I've seen all of it because we're all doing our best. Right. And I'm not even dogging on it. Like I have lots of friends, especially my friends that I used to work with on the streets who were using drugs and alcohol, like as a way to get through every day. And that was the tool that they were able to use, and I'm not at all recommending such a thing, but I am saying like from a place of understanding that the trauma that they've experienced and the tools that they had in their toolbox, like that was the most accessible path for them at that time. So I'm not even having judgment for anybody who's using a tool that's not great. I mean, I would certainly also advocate for a healthier, approach. And I did that with my friends on the streets too, like, hey, there's other ways. And sometimes that's all people need to hear. It's like, hey, I see you, I see your struggle. And just so you know, like there are some other options, yeah. So yes.
Yeah, that's good. I know I've dealt with, that's not the right phrase I want to use. I've walked alongside young people, especially young women, but some young men as well, who use things like cutting or other self-injurious behavior to deal with anxiety. And if it's not obvious from the outside, like that's not a good one. That leaves scars. I mean, literally. And there's help for that as well. So if you're a person listening now who's dealt with that, if something's very serious and you're thinking of doing more than cutting, 988 is a number you can call anytime. You can even text it as well, and you can talk with somebody on text if calling on the phone sounds like really, like I don't know, more anxiety inducing. But there are other resources out there as well for people who are dealing with things like that. If you found yourself in a loop where you can't stop that kind of coping strategy, there is help, and there is hope too. I have seen many people start with a bad coping strategy and move into a healthy coping strategy and get healthy. So there is so much hope.
So much hope.
Yeah.
You would know most of all because Mike was one of the people who sat with me while I was going through a time in my life. Not a lot of people knew, but if people saw it, I didn't say anything, but I did used to self-harm. And the way that I got myself to find different coping strategies for myself that were less harmful to my own body were to look at those people in my life that I cared about, that were there for me through everything, that offered me a shoulder to cry on, somebody to talk to about things. Other, like what they did, I looked at what they did in their daily lives and I saw that they exercised more, they ate better, they hung out with their friends, they told their friends, like, hey, this thing is going on in my life and this is really, really hard for me. Like, I learned a lot from watching the other people in my life give people that opportunity to share those experiences. And it eventually did help me to stop, because I saw that all of these people in the world care about me. And if even one of them knew, that I know that they would be devastated. Because I've seen what it did to my parents, and it broke my heart. I never wanted anybody else to find out again. But I thought about those things. What if my youth pastor at the time saw that? What if my best friend of since kindergarten had seen that I had started again? What if all of these games had started playing? Thinking about the sympathy that all of my friends would give me and all of the compassion that they would have wanted to give me when I was doing those things instead broke me more than letting that happen continuously and letting it continue on that spiral. So if you have trusted adults, trusted friends or anything, you don't have to share how you're feeling or what you're doing, but just tell them, like, I'm in a bad spot and I would love a hug. Sometimes that's all you really do need in that moment. It's just a hug. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, Mike gives some pretty great ones. Mike and Jackie give great hugs.
Jackie is the assistant director of student ministries in my other job other than this Tapestry stuff. And she does give great hugs. She gives great everything. She's a great gift giver. She's an amazing person. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, Mikayla. That was really vulnerable of you.
Very vulnerable. And also I feel like you're touching on something that is so true and so maybe like unrecognized truth, because, you know, therapy, obviously I'm a therapist. I think therapy is fantastic. I believe in therapy. I think it is so powerful. But even as a therapist, I sit with my clients and some of my clients are so isolated. And I know what you just said, which is that like community is so powerful and it has so much capacity. Like, honestly, in my deeply optimistic perspective, like I would hope to work myself out of a job someday. If we had a world where everyone had a community that was caring and people were able to be vulnerable in that way that you're talking about, I don't think we'd need therapists, to be honest. Like, I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetime, but maybe someday. But I think that is so important and so true. And it's something that I'm always trying to advocate for in my own life and in my clients, of just like finding your people, your tribe, and how to be brave and be honest. You know, even if you're not ready to be the full 100% honest, how can you show up and say, I'm struggling, and see the kindness and the compassion and the love of the people who know you? That is like so deeply, it can be so healing.
Yeah. That's really good.
Even in my current life, I started going through a breakup around August, and to help myself get out of the anxiety I was feeling about meeting new people, making new friends, going back out into the world alone, so to say, I started joining a dance class with one of my friends. And that's eventually what helped me pull myself out of those thoughts of like, what if I don't make friends? Who cares? I have my dance friends now. I have my dance class. I have these people who we all struggle with the same thing together every week that takes my mind completely out of the rest of the world for at least an hour. Like, finding your people and a hobby that you can do with other people has proven to be, at least for me, like in anything that I do, because before that I was weight training with friends, beneficial, because I have more people to just share throughout the day, even like the little things that like, I had to wait for the doctor for this long and it made me really anxious today. Like, it's tiny, but the tiny things for me tend to add up to very big things for me. Yeah. So then sharing all of the tiny things with my friends, even though it seems quite mundane, helps overall.
Yeah.
That's really good. And I want to go back and just touch on one thing you said, Mikayla, about if you're dealing with this thing, you can share some of your life with somebody as you build trust, and you know that you have someone you can say the thing to, even if it's just like, hey, I'm having a really hard time right now. I think there can also be something really powerful about getting specific if it's somebody you trust. That is that if you have this, like I said, if you've got a coping strategy that you know isn't working, isn't helping your anxiety, talk specifically with a trusted person about what that is, because when it's no longer secret, it starts to lose some of its power over you. It's no longer a thing that's like lurking in the shadows. You bring it out into the light, and all of a sudden it starts to shrivel. So I would encourage anybody listening to also speak as vulnerably as you're able with people that are trustworthy, because it can shrink and kind of disable the bad stuff and help you flourish and thrive.
I always think it's easier to do it scared if you've got somebody to be scared with.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, that's good. I like that. Man, you've got all these good phrases. These are good.
Thanks. My friends and I all have anxiety, and we compare therapy sessions.
Hey, that's more bang for your buck there, Mikayla.
That is so good. That is so good.
Good for you.
Thank you. It's nice. It's a good hodgepodge of like, oh, well, my therapist said this about my issue. This might help you. It really benefits, especially if you have a group of people where you feel so open. You're like, yeah, I had a panic attack last Tuesday and blah, 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 blah. But like, it helps to have the people who you can share those experiences and that anxiety with.
Definitely.
99% of the time. So, but yeah. that's an honest truth. I'm not going to tell them I said that though.
No,
until they listen to this.
Right. Well, even as I'm thinking about like some of the anxiety I've experienced in motherhood, I am so grateful that I have other friends that are having babies like around the similar time that I am, because sometimes the intrusive thoughts of my experience of being a mother are like, they're dark and they're strange and they come out of nowhere and you feel crazy. And then your friend says that they had the exact same thing, and it's so validating and normalizing. You're like, oh, okay, like, thank you.
It doesn't feel so crazy anymore.
Yeah. It feel so crazy.
Yeah.
Or at least we're both crazy. So there's
solidarity and crazy is also nice. I love it.
I had a friend I grew up with named Jason, and whenever somebody asked him where he was going, he'd say, "Crazy, want to come?"
Sam,
I would love, right? I'd love to talk a little bit about how maybe the experience of anxiety can impact the way we look at or think about our spirituality or who God is or our relationship with God. And I kind of want to kind of wrap up this episode with this thought. And I would love to hear from each of you, of course. But one of the things I think I've seen and experienced in my own life is this idea that, like, if I was really okay, or if God really cared about me, I wouldn't be going through this, have these kinds of feelings. Or why can't, like, I've prayed about it. Why doesn't God just take it away? Or why doesn't God just make this situation better? And I don't know if I have an answer for that, but I think, well, before I guess go to any of my responses, maybe I'd love to hear from you guys actually about kind of your either personal experiences or experiences you've seen from people you've been in community with.
Can you kind of restate what you're asking, Mike? Are you saying, well, a couple things came up for me. Maybe direct me a little bit.
Well, first of all, whatever came up, I think is perfectly good to share. The other is, I think sometimes anxiety or the experience of anxiety can kind of have an impact on our thinking about who God is or our relationship with the divine. What's your experience with that, I guess, or the experience you've seen other people have with it?
Thanks. Yeah, this one's not crystal clear in my head, so I'll do my best to kind of wander through the answer.
Talk it out. That's good. Yeah.
I think the first thing that came to mind for me, honestly, is that I think this is going to sound weird, but I think that anxiety in some ways is God-given, at least a small amount, because I do think anxiety is actually like life without any anxiety is actually very troublesome, right? If we don't have any level of anxiety, we don't know, if you think about ancient humanity, we don't know when to not put our camp near where the bear lives, or where the lion lives, right? And so at a certain level, even I think about this in my anxiety I've talked about as a mother, where I think actually a certain level of anxiety as a mother is biological and I would almost say God-given, because as a mother, I am supposed to keep my children alive. And if I don't have any concern about my kid getting hit by a car or the millions of scenarios I could run through where my children could die, that we're in trouble. Do you know what I mean? If I don't have any thought of that in my head. So in some ways I want to say like, thank you, to anxiety, to God.
It's good.
Because it does have a place, right? And I say that with a strong grain of salt too, that like, obviously anything good can take off. And like, I've spent a lot of my life figuring out how to cope and how to manage and how to like keep my anxiety from controlling me or stealing all of the joy and goodness I have in my life. Right. So certainly a spectrum there. That's kind of the first couple things that came to mind. If Mikayla, you want to touch on that as well?
Heck yeah. Sorry. My cat had his own anxiety just awake him from his dead slumber to come out here and yell at me. But oh man, I totally agree. I've definitely learned where my anxiety can intersect with my faith, and it's within my own personal thoughts too, along with what you said, because I have learned to think against the thought that I originally had when I was really, really, really little, which is like, I want to be this good enough to be good enough for God, like to be good enough. And that's what created my anxiety, was that I was always afraid that I was never going to be good enough for God, or that I was going to sin and somehow not be good enough to get into heaven. So that in turn kind of created some anxiety early on for me early in life. But I wonder how much of that has to do with how intense those teachings were for me at that same age. Because I was also like 5, 6, 7, 8, growing into the church and growing into my own knowledge of of what faith is and who God was, and trying to conceptualize God. That's a really hard concept for a child, is like some omnipotent presence that's always with you but isn't visible. So like, I didn't know how I was gonna, like, if I did something, like I said, this is gonna sound so funny, if I said like damn or something at 7 years old, I was so afraid that I was never gonna get into heaven ever again, because I said this one cuss word once. And I have had to teach myself since then, and through other lessons from the church, that that's not true. Straight up not true. And that God wouldn't do that, because he's more loving than what my initial fears are. My fears of being good enough will never, ever, ever outweigh God's love. And that has also greatly helped me understand how much more he loves me than the quiet little anxiety voice in the back of my head screaming, because he's too loud to hear.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, God is bigger than your biggest fears. God is bigger, more loving than your anxiety is, even if the anxiety helps in some ways. That's really good. And Reb, what you mentioned about anxiety being from God, I think there are certainly elements of it for sure. Like I get to coach a lot of people as they get up to speak in front of others in my role at the church. So I'm up in front of people all the time. I obviously am doing this kind of thing all the time. And but I still get like the butterflies often when I'm just about to start. And so I share with anybody who's kind of going up for the first time to talk in front of everybody. and say, like, if you're feeling nervous now, that's just your body telling you that you're about to do something that you think is important, that you want to do well at. And it's totally normal to feel a little bit of that. Of course, the trouble comes in when we always feel that way, when we feel about every situation and every moment of life. If you got that much cortisol flowing through your body, it's going to cause some damage at some point.
Right.
So
it's an important distinction.
Yeah, important distinction, right? So like, yeah, finding a way, like we talked about in the first episode, of like this is good in this situation. The problem for us humans is we can bring that situation with us. We can continue to dwell on it. And I think there are certain bits of it, like you said, Reb, like, actually, this is a God-given thing. But then there are other ways in which I think it can interfere with our relationship with God.
100%.
So, yeah. So in our next episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of maybe some spiritual practices that can help with anxiety, maybe some other just like more not so spiritual practices that can help. I'd love to talk about that. And also talk a little bit about how churches, faith communities have maybe been unhelpful, which we touched on in the first episode, but talk maybe a little bit more about that in the next episode. So I think this is a good spot to wrap it up. And we will see or hear, or you'll hear us anyway, you guys next time on our next episode. So bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
The Tapestry Podcast is produced by Stephen Bailey. Original music was scored by Taylor Martin. Special thanks to Lauren Richmond Jr. and Resonate Media. You can learn more about Tapestry and join the conversation on our Discord channel at tapestrytalk.org. Thanks for joining us.